I've heard it. You've heard it too. But is it true? Does funny equal no money in pro wrestling? That's next on Till We Make It. I'm Mike Quackenbush, and this is Till We Make It. If you are passionate about the craft of professional wrestling and you're never done learning all about it, then you have landed in the exact right place, my friend. What are you waiting for? Go ahead, join the Till We Make It tribe. Subscribe right now. Today's video was inspired by an angle that I've been following, which happens to feature one of my awesome patrons, Boone. And watching this angle unfold got me thinking a lot about comedic matches and humorous beats within the world of professional wrestling. And I suppose a deeper examination of exactly that is a video unto itself. But pondering this topic does tend to invoke the old wrestling saying, funny equals no money. Have you heard this before? It means that comedic wrestlers don't sell tickets, or that performers possessed of great comedic skill can't convert that into revenue in the world of pro wrestling. But is this old adage actually true? Sidebar. I set up my lights, microphone, tripod, the whole step and repeat, everything that I need in place to make one of these for you. And only as I went to press record on the camera did I notice that I put the banner up upside down. Your boy Mike needs a day off really badly. I think this whole funny equals no money thing begs a few questions in the same way that what is the best wrestling school does, or who is the best wrestler of all time? Well, what's the criteria that we are using to arrive at an answer? How do we compute that? What things are we judging them on? And so to really do this topic justice, to really look at does funny equal no money in professional wrestling, I think we need to attack it from 4 different angles and see what we come up with. And hopefully we'll arrive at an answer by the end of today's video. Ready? Okay, up first, let's try and answer this question. Does a card composed entirely of comedy wrestling draw an audience? And I think unfortunately, there are very few pure examples of this to call upon as evidence. The first thing to spring to my mind is Kaiju Big Battle. And I know some people will make the argument this doesn't belong in the pro wrestling conversation. I am of the opinion that it does, even placing aside my personal biases, having promoted and produced Kaiju for a few years in the past. I think Kaiju belongs in the discussion. And unfortunately, a lot of its appeal over the last 30 years can really be attributed to curiosity, to the spectacle of the event, to the mystique around the brand, not solely to the comedic aspects. There's a variety of reasons why people attend Kaiju Big Battle, and their repeat customers know it's a fun night out whether or not you're following their humorous storylines. So to try and attribute all their sales across decades solely to the comedy of it, I don't think we can do that. I don't think there's compelling evidence to say that an entire card of comedy wrestling sells. I gotta say no to that one. If you're getting something out of today's video, won't you please just take a second right now and leave me a like-a-palooza down below. It is important, yes, to YouTube, but also to me. Thanks. Up second, do wrestlers with comedic skills draw? Well, I think that depends. If they've been elevated to become an attraction, then yes, they can draw. If they're constantly relegated to roles where they're not being featured prominently, that handicaps their ability to draw. But let me offer you these 2 examples. Number 1, there was a stretch of time when one of the few legitimate draws on the independent circuit was Colt Cabana. This is before he signs with AEW. You put Colt Cabana on a poster, you announced that he was going to appear on your card, tickets started to sell. And Cabana is a tremendous wrestler, possessed of immense comedic talents. And he absolutely was a draw. I'm speaking of my own firsthand experience promoting events that featured Colt Cabana. Or, number two, let's take a look at Orange Cassidy. We've all watched over the course of the last 18 to 24 months how Orange Cassidy has developed into a legitimate draw beyond a shadow of a doubt. It's irrefutable at this point. And Cassidy is a world-class wrestler, possessed of superior comedic ability. And he is absolutely a draw. So whenever I offer these two examples to someone who does subscribe to the philosophy that funny equals no money, they will counter these examples by saying this. Well, did Colt Cabana's drawing power in the 2010s match up against Hogan's drawing power of the 1980s? Does Orange Cassidy put butts in seats the same way John Cena did? Well, no. But to be fair, in the last 150 years or so, very few wrestlers outside of Cena at his commercial peak and Hogan at his commercial peak ever drew at that level. If we're using that metric to determine whether wrestlers with comedic skill are a draw or not, well then you could also reasonably argue that there's no point in booking The Big Show. There's no reason to ever put Jake the Snake Roberts on your card because The Big Show doesn't draw at Cena's level. Jake the Snake doesn't draw at Hogan's level. So that must mean that they equal no money too. And that's ludicrous. We can count on one hand the other people outside of Hogan and Cena that drew at that level. The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Bruno Sammartino. Go ahead, fill in the rest for me down below in the comments. It isn't many. Outside of those very few unique superstars, it is a richly diverse ensemble of characters that draws the audience to see a wrestling brand's live events. And a richly diverse ensemble of characters must include some who possess comedic talent. Otherwise, those cards become mired in a self-serious monotone that bores the masses and only pleases a select few. Up third, do comedic wrestlers sell merchandise? Is that a way in which they convert their skill into revenue in wrestling? And to answer this question, I'm calling upon a little of my own experience. I'm going to share some of my data with you. You may know. Across the last couple of decades, I've produced a ton of live events, and I've also been lucky enough to train or break in tons of immensely talented professional wrestlers, many of whom wrestled for me season after season while developing into superstars who are now known the world over. And of all these luminaries, do you know who sold me the most merchandise by far? It was these guys. Los Ice Creams. The long-suffering comic relief tag team of two anthropomorphic ice cream cones sold 5 times the amount of merchandise of the next closest runner-up. 5 times. So to answer the question, do comedic wrestlers sell merchandise? I can tell you the answer is yes. Listen carefully because this next one is a tad nuanced. Does a purely comedic match, or at least a match that contains some humorous elements, have a place on a serious wrestling card? I think the answer to this is absolutely yes. These two things balance each other out. Comedy and drama, they are opposites of one another. This was understood by the ancient Greeks millennia ago. It's understood by the Marvel Cinematic Universe right now. They help draw each other into clarity. You don't appreciate how bright it is outside until you're plunged into absolute darkness. You don't fully appreciate the sweet smell of success unless you have also tasted a bitter failure. By juxtaposing these two things against each other in the right measure, they help draw each other into clarity. In the absence of comedy, nothing but heavy drama becomes exhausting to the viewer. They both need to be present to create balance in a wrestling show. So, having considered all of these things, do I believe that funny equals no money in professional wrestling? No, I do not. I do not subscribe to that philosophy. I reject it. Now, having said as much, does bad comedy hurt a show? Yes, it absolutely does. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about a wrestling show or a Netflix show or a Broadway show. Bad comedy is never good, but judiciously deployed comic relief, delivered at the right times, in the right doses, by wrestlers possessed of great comedic skill, supplies balance and levity to a pro wrestling card. That's what I think, but what do you think? Tell me down below in the comments right now. If you're looking to feast upon a smorgasbord of comedically talented wrestlers, I'm going to rattle off some recommendations for you. But first, I want to pause and thank all of my awesome patrons. Whether you subscribe to my Patreon at the master level, troubadour level, or apprentice level, I appreciate each and every one of you. It is because of you that this channel keeps going. There's a link appearing on screen if you'd like to come and join our community. Some recommendations by region. Let's start with the UK. Look for Catweasel, Les Kellett, Grado. Any combination of Ken Joyce with Tony Costas is a joy. The best performances by Jim Breaks will crack you up. Let's jump to Japan. The late, great Gran Nani was where you've got to start. Look for Osaka Pro matches between Ebisan and Quishinbo Kamen. Of course, Kikutaro has to be part of that conversation.